Hey everybody, this is Ray Harvey for Access Jitsu. Welcome to our video on disabling the Shift key, or to use its proper name, disabling the AllowBypassKey property. So to make sure we're all on the same page, what I'm describing here is pressing and holding the Shift key when you open an Access database. If you press and hold the Shift key until a database is completely opened, it will prevent any code from running. It will prevent macros and VBA code from running. So it'll prevent the macro you have set as your auto exec macro, and it will also prevent your startup form from executing. And by startup form I mean, let's head over here to the File tab and go to Access Options, and then to Current Database. Right here, the display form I have set to Form Auto Run. This form will automatically open when the database first starts. So if you have code you want to run or tasks you want to perform when your database first starts, a startup form or display form is a good place to put that. For instance, I will sometimes capture a network user ID at application startup. Sometimes I will log that user ID in an audit table to note so-and-so logged in at this date and time from this machine or that machine. So if you have code in these places that you want to run every time your database starts, so you might want to consider preventing your users from using the Shift key, thus preventing your code from running. So let's take a look at how to do this. It is a database property. However, there is no place in the backstage where you can set this from the user interface. You can only do this from your Visual Basic code. And predictably, I have a form set up to help us with this. I have a single checkbox on here, allow Shift key at startup, which we can either click or not click, right? And then we have a button here to actually perform the update. So let's take a look at the code that goes behind this. First, I've got, let's move this down, I have the form load event. What I want to do in the form load event is to display on the form what the current value of this property is. Now the property is called AllowBypassKey. Okay, and we get to it by using the current database object. I'm using current DB here, dot properties, and then the name as a string in parentheses. This gives us a Boolean value, either true or false. Now when we say AllowBypassKey equals true, that means pressing the Shift key will prevent your code from running. If AllowBypassKey is equal to false, that means that pressing the Shift key will have no effect and your code will run anyway. So we're just going to simply pass that value or display that value on the checkbox that's on our form. Now, this property does not exist by default for a new database. So when you have a new database and the property does not exist, pressing the Shift key will prevent code from running. That's the default behavior. So if you want to prevent the Shift key from working, you need to create this property and then set it to false. So after we attempt to interrogate the AllowBypassKey database property and load it or bind it to our checkbox in the form, we want to check to see if we have an error. Because if this property does not exist yet, we'll get an error, and the error number will be 3270. If the property doesn't exist yet, I just want to set that checkbox equal to false. Now if we got an error and it's not 3270, then I want to display that error value down here. I've got my form name here, I've got my event name here, and then we're going to show the error number and the error description there. So that gets us through starting up the form and displaying that bypass key property value. Now let's take a look at the code behind the update button. That is here. And it really is just the reverse here, okay? So we have the current db.properties and the same property, setting it equal to whatever value we have in our checkbox. Now check what you're doing here in terms of what you're expecting from your behavior. I have this worded allow Shift key at startup. So if I click it, that means I want the Shift key to work. If I have it set to false or not checked, I don't want the Shift key to work. And that is how this property is going to work in the code. Okay. If I set AllowBypassKey equal to true, that means the Shift key is going to work, prevent code from running. If I set AllowBypassKey to false or unchecked, that means it will have no effect on my code running. Now again, like we did up here in our load event, we want to check to see if the database property exists. Because the first time you ever run this code, that database property probably will not exist, and therefore you need to create the database property. So again, down here we have an on error statement that says to go down here to this label, the sub error label, We're going to interrogate our error number, and if it is 3270, that means the database property doesn't exist yet. We want to create it. So we have defined up here PRP as a DAO property. So we're going to set PRP equal to current database create property, and then this is the name we want to create it as, AllowBypassKey. It is of type Boolean. It takes a true or false value, and then we're going to go ahead and give it an initial value, and that's the value from our checkbox on the form. And then we append that property to the current database properties collection. And of course, if that error number we got was not 3270, we want to display that error in a message box down here. So let's have a quick demo. I have a form here called form auto run. As we saw before, it is set up as a display form, so when the database starts, this form should display. I'm going to go ahead and close it right now. Notice I have set this to true allow the shift key at startup, which means I want the shift key to work. I want the shift key to prevent my code from running. Let's close the database, open it, pressing the shift key. My form did not load. Let's go over here. Let's set the allow shift key at startup to false. Click update, close it. I'm going to open it again, pressing the shift key. This time my form did display, even though I was holding the shift key, which is exactly what we want to happen. So there you go, only a few lines of code that have a very large impact or effect on how your application runs, or at least how it starts up. As usual, I have a link to the code listing in the description below the video. I hope you got something out of this video. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.